"You're fired," he said. "Clean out your desk." He threw the report, all 47 pages of it, directly into her face. The papers scattered across the floor of the 42nd floor boardroom like leaves in a storm. Every senior executive in that room went completely still. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The coffee cup stopped mid-lift. The laptop stopped mid-scroll. 14 people sat frozen in their chairs watching, and she didn't flinch, not once. She bent down slowly, calmly, and picked up one page from the floor. Just one. She looked at it for a moment. Then she looked up at him, at Richard Hargrove, CEO of Hargrove Capital Partners, the most feared man on the 42nd floor, and she leaned forward and whispered 4 words into the silence of that room. 4 words, and Richard Hargrove's face went white. He had no idea who she really was, not a single clue. In 30 seconds, the most powerful man in that building was going to learn the most expensive lesson of his career, and every person in that room was going to witness it. Have you ever worked somewhere that never saw you coming? Have you ever been dismissed before you even opened your mouth? Let me take you back, 3 months earlier, to the day Maya Osei walked through those doors for the very first time. Maya Osei had the kind of morning that starts before the sun does. She was up at 4:45, not because an alarm told her to be, but because quiet was the only luxury she could afford. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland, 12 minutes from the metro station when the weather was good, 20 when it wasn't. The radiator clicked all winter. The kitchen window had a crack sealed with painter's tape she kept meaning to replace. The carpet in the hallway was the color of an old bruise, but her desk by the window, that desk was immaculate. A laptop, a legal pad, a cup of sharpened pencils that her mother had given her when she graduated from Howard University with a master's degree in financial economics. Her mother's name had been Vera. She'd taught middle school math for 31 years in a building with no air conditioning and textbooks from 1987. She had passed away the autumn before Maya started at Hargrove Capital. She had never seen her daughter walk into that building. The pencil cup had Vera's initials carved into the base, V.O. Vera Osei. Maya had done it herself with a pocket knife the week after the funeral. Some mornings she held it for a moment before she started working. Just a moment. Then she got to it. She had been hired as a senior quantitative analyst on the risk management team. Her specialization was systemic exposure modeling. She could look at a portfolio of complex financial instruments and see the cracks before they became crevices. She had spent 4 years at a smaller boutique firm doing exactly this kind of work before Hargrove Capital recruited her. They had called her. She had not applied. She had asked for a salary they said was high, and they had agreed within 48 hours. She should have known then what that meant. When powerful people say yes too fast, it's because they already know what they're going to do later. The Hargrove Capital offices occupied the top 4 floors of a glass building in downtown Washington, D.C. The lobby had a chandelier that cost more than Maya's entire apartment building. The elevator banks played jazz at a volume calibrated to communicate wealth without effort. The 42nd floor, the executive floor, had a carpet so thick you felt slightly taller walking on it. Maya spent her first 3 weeks on the 39th floor where the analysts worked. She noted things. She noted that when she walked into a room of colleagues, the conversations continued. She noted that when she asked a question in a team meeting, the question was answered by someone addressing the person to her left. She noted that her building access card had been issued with the name Maya O, the surname cut off, and that when she asked about it twice, she was told twice it would be corrected, and it never was. She also noted the numbers. That was the thing they hadn't counted on. She was very, very good with numbers. Within 6 weeks, she had identified something that nobody else on the team had seen. The firm's flagship hedge fund, a $4.7 billion portfolio, carried a concentrated exposure in short volatility instruments that were structurally misaligned with their stated risk profile. In plain language, if the market moved the wrong way, the fund was going to bleed fast, not slowly, fast. She ran the models 14 times. She brought in 3 different stress test scenarios. The results did not change. She documented everything in 47 pages of tightly reasoned analysis. She submitted it to her direct manager on a Thursday afternoon. By Friday morning, it had reached the office of Richard Hargrove. Richard Hargrove had built Hargrove Capital from a small advisory firm into one of the most aggressive hedge funds on the East Coast. He was 61 years old. He wore the same brand of watch that had once appeared on the cover of a finance magazine. He had a habit of calling junior analysts sport, and not in a warm way. He had a nickname for the female analysts on the team that I will not repeat here because some words are not worth carrying. He read the first 3 pages of Maya's report on Friday afternoon. He read them the way a person reads something they are looking for a reason to dismiss. He sent an email to her manager that evening. The email said 2 things. First, that the analysis was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of their hedging strategy, and second, and he used this exact word, that juniors should not be presenting firm-level risk assessments without going through proper review channels. Maya was not a junior. She had the title of senior analyst. She had a master's degree and 6 years of industry experience. But that word was a message, and she received it. She did not change the report. She did not soften it. She did not ask permission to feel what she felt about that email. She simply submitted the report again through the formal review channel on Monday morning. She attached a 1-paragraph cover note that was precise and professional and cited 3 published papers that supported her methodology. Her manager called her into a brief meeting Tuesday afternoon. He said the report was being reviewed. He said these things took time. He said she should focus on her regular deliverables in the meantime. He did not make eye contact for most of the meeting. Maya said, "Understood," and she went back to her desk, and she picked up the pencil cup with her mother's initials carved into the base, and she held it for exactly 1 moment. And then she made a phone call. But we'll come back to that. For the next 6 weeks, the report sat. It circulated. It reached 3 different levels of review. 2 of those reviewers quietly agreed with her findings but wrote memos that softened the conclusions. One of those reviewers had a compensation structure tied to the performance of the exact fund she was analyzing. These things have a way of shaping what people choose to see, and the market, as markets sometimes do, began to move in the direction Maya had predicted. Not catastrophically, not yet, but the early tremors were there if you knew how to read them. Maya knew how to read them. She prepared a second report. This one was 22 pages. It was even more precise than the first. It included updated stress test data from the previous 4 weeks of market movement. It included on page 4 a single sentence that would later be quoted in a federal court filing. She brought it to the quarterly review meeting on a Tuesday morning in October, the meeting where the executive team, including Richard Hargrove, received reports from all 4 analytical divisions. She sat at the end of the conference table. She was the only black woman in the room. She was also the only person in the room who had been right. She had 1 copy of the report in front of her. She had another copy in her bag, and there was something else in her bag, something small and rectangular about the size of a paperback book tucked into the inside pocket. We'll come back to that too. Richard Hargrove arrived 4 minutes late. He sat at the head of the table. He glanced around the room, acknowledged 3 people by name, and did not acknowledge Maya at all. He pulled up his phone, put it face down on the table, and said, "Let's get moving." The division heads presented in sequence. When it was Maya's turn, she stood and placed her report on the table and began to speak. She spoke for 6 minutes. She was calm, specific, and methodical. She cited page numbers. She referenced her own earlier submission and the timeline of its review. She quantified the risk. She quantified it again in a different way to make sure it was clear. She kept her voice even and steady, the way her mother used to speak when she was teaching a room full of restless 12-year-olds something they didn't want to know but needed to. Richard Hargrove let her speak for 4 of those 6 minutes. Then he picked up his copy of the report. He looked at the cover page. He looked at Maya, and he said, "Who approved this presentation?" She said, "The report was submitted through standard review channels in September and again in early October." He said, "That's not what I asked." She said, "It was submitted to..." He said, "Do you know how long I've been in this business?" She waited. He said, 32 years, and in 32 years, I have never had a junior analyst walk into a quarterly review and tell me my flagship fund is a liability." He said the word junior the way you say something you've rehearsed. He tapped the report against the table twice. And then, in front of 14 witnesses, he threw it. Not dropped, threw it. The papers scattered across the mahogany table and off the edge and across the carpet. 47 pages of careful, documented, accurate analysis floating to the floor of the 42nd floor boardroom. "You're fired," he said. "Clean out your desk." Silence. Complete, total, absolute silence. And Maya bent down. Slowly, calmly. She picked up 1 page from the floor. She looked at it. She looked at him. And she leaned forward slightly. Not standing, not raising her voice, not 1 decibel above a conversational register. And she said 4 words. 4 words that Richard Hargrove had not heard in 32 years of business. 4 words that turned his face the color of old concrete. I'm on the board. Go back and watch the moment she picked up that single page. Watch which page it was. It was page 1, the cover page. The one with the official seal of the Hargrove Capital Partners Board of Directors in the bottom right corner. The seal that was there because Maya Osei, 9 weeks earlier, had been quietly appointed to an independent advisory board position by the firm's 3 largest institutional investors who had received her original 47-page report directly through a channel that had nothing to do with Richard Hargrove. Remember the phone call we mentioned? The one she made after the Tuesday meeting where her manager wouldn't make eye contact? She had called a woman named Dr. Patricia Washington, a woman who sat on the board of the largest pension fund in the state of Maryland, a woman who had recruited Maya out of graduate school and who had watched her career for 6 years and who had, when she received that phone call, said, "Send me everything." Dr. Washington had shared the report with 2 other institutional investors. Those investors held collectively 31% of Hargrove Capital's assets under management. They had read 47 pages of analysis and they had agreed with every word. They had not told Richard Hargrove they agreed. They had simply begun a process that moved quietly, the way important things often do, beneath the surface, invisible to the people who should have been paying attention. The board appointment had been processed 3 weeks before that October meeting. Maya had the documentation in her bag. That was the rectangular object in the inside pocket. A sealed envelope containing her official appointment letter, signed by 3 institutional directors, effective 60 days from signature. The silence in the room after those 4 words lasted 9 seconds. One of the junior analysts later said it felt like 9 minutes. Richard Hargrove opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at the papers on the floor. He looked at Maya. He looked at the other executives at the table who were looking at their hands, at the wall, at the ceiling, anywhere but at him. He said, "That's..." and stopped. She said, "I'll need you to reprint those pages before we continue." Her voice was perfectly level. "We still have a risk assessment to complete." What happened next did not happen slowly. These things, once in motion, rarely do. The firm's general counsel was in the building. He had been briefed 2 days earlier, not by Richard Hargrove, but by the institutional investors' legal team. He walked into the boardroom 11 minutes after Maya said those 4 words. He had 2 colleagues with him. He placed a folder on the table in front of Richard Hargrove and asked for a brief recess. That recess lasted 4 hours. The quarterly review meeting was not resumed. By the end of that day, the Securities and Exchange Commission's Office of Compliance Inspections had received a formal notification regarding the suppression of a material risk assessment at a registered investment advisor. The notification had been filed by Dr. Patricia Washington's legal team 6 days earlier, timed to arrive the morning of the quarterly review. They had planned this carefully. Maya had planned this carefully. The internal investigation began within 72 hours. Emails were preserved. Review logs were pulled. The memo written by the reviewer with the compensation conflict was recovered. The 2 softened memos were recovered. The original email from Richard Hargrove calling Maya's work the product of a fundamental misunderstanding was recovered and placed into a file that would eventually contain 1,140 pages of documentation. Richard Hargrove was placed on administrative leave 4 days after the boardroom meeting. The announcement was made in a firm-wide email sent at 6:47 on a Thursday morning. The email was written in the careful, bloodless language of corporate communications, but everyone who worked at Hargrove Capital understood what it meant. 3 people from the review chain were suspended pending investigation. The reviewer with the compensation conflict resigned before he could be suspended. His resignation letter, which was leaked to 2 financial news outlets within hours, was 7 sentences long and contained the phrase, "differences in professional philosophy," which, in the language of people who know they have been wrong, means something quite specific. The SEC investigation became public 10 days after that. The story was picked up by the Wall Street Journal on a Wednesday. By Thursday, it had been picked up by 6 other outlets. By Friday, the phrase, "the Hargrove Report," meaning Maya's original 47-page analysis, had appeared in over 200 published articles. A risk management professor at the University of Chicago called it a textbook example of institutional suppression of inconvenient analysis. She said it in an interview. She did not soften it. The clip of Richard Hargrove throwing the papers, captured on the boardroom's internal security camera, which the legal team had requested and received, was released as part of the regulatory filing and was immediately posted online. It was viewed 11 million times in 48 hours. The hashtag was simple. It was just the name of the report. 47 pages. That was all it said. The firm's 3 largest institutional investors voted, within 30 days of the investigation going public, to restructure the executive leadership. The vote was not close. Richard Hargrove's tenure as CEO ended on a Tuesday afternoon. He was not given a farewell event. He was not given the customary parting statement in the firm's newsletter. He was given a document to sign and a box for his things, the same as anyone else. The civil litigation came later. It came from multiple directions. A class action on behalf of fund investors who argued that material risk information had been withheld from them, that the suppression of Maya's report had directly affected their ability to make informed decisions. A separate wrongful termination action filed on Maya's behalf, which was settled within 4 months for a number that has not been publicly disclosed but which was described by her attorney in a brief comment to the press as appropriate to the conduct. 2 regulatory penalties against the firm totaling $7.8 million. A consent decree requiring the firm to establish an independent risk reporting structure that bypassed the executive suite entirely. A direct institutional reform built on the bones of what had been done to Maya's report. One of the junior analysts who had been in the boardroom that morning, a 24-year-old named James, who had watched those pages scatter across the floor and had not said a word, submitted a voluntary statement to the SEC investigators. He said he had known the report was being suppressed. He had said nothing because he had been afraid. He said this plainly in writing without any hedging, and he asked that his statement be part of the public record. It was. His name appears in the regulatory filing, in a section titled Witness Accounts. He was not penalized for his silence, but he did not escape it either. He carried it. He still does. Maya Osei was formally named to the restructured board of Hargrove Capital Partners on a morning in March, 7 months after the boardroom meeting. The vote was unanimous. She was 34 years old. She was the first black woman to hold a board seat at the firm in its 29-year history. She wore her mother's earrings that morning, small gold hoops that Vera Osei had worn to every parent-teacher conference, every school board meeting, every moment that required her to walk into a room and be seen clearly. 1 year later, Maya established the Vera Osei Fellowship, a fully funded 2-year fellowship for early career analysts from underrepresented backgrounds, housed within the restructured firm's research division. The fellowship covers salary, benefits, and a mentorship pairing with a senior board member. It is named specifically and intentionally for a woman who taught middle school math in a building with no air conditioning, a woman who taught her daughter that the numbers don't lie, even when the people around them do. Especially then. The first cohort of Vera Osei Fellows was 4 people. 2 were recent graduates. 1 had changed careers at 37. 1 had been told by a previous employer that her analysis was too aggressive. She was 29. Her first week on the job, Maya stopped by her desk and placed a copy of the original 47-page report in front of her. She said, "Read this, all of it." She said it the way her mother used to say something important. Quietly, without drama, as though the thing spoke well enough for itself. It did. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever done the work and watched it get thrown on the floor, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe and hit the bell. And tell me, have you ever had your work dismissed before anyone read it? Have you ever been in that room and said nothing? Leave a comment below. Here's what really gets me about this story. It's not the victory, it's not the settlement or the hashtag or the consent decree. What gets me is that pencil cup on her desk every morning, the one with VO carved into the base. Maya Osei was not carrying a hidden superpower in a dramatic sense. She was carrying her mother. She was carrying 31 years of a woman who showed up to a room that underestimated her and taught the truth anyway, every single day, in a building with no air conditioning and textbooks from 1987. Richard Hargrove threw 47 pages in her face and thought he was throwing out an analyst. He was throwing out all of that. And it came back. It always comes back. What is your 47 pages? What is the thing you've documented, the thing you know is right, that someone told you wasn't worth the paper it was printed on? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.